Salutations, everyone! Welcome back to another Total Warhammer 3 guide for Immortal Empires. Obviously, this is still in beta, so changes are to be expected. So, we are here today with one of my least favorite factions, the Legions of Chaos, the Daemons of Chaos faction. We'll talk about it. I don't particularly like this faction, but we'll go over it and how to play it. The video will be divided into several sections. We'll go over the faction, roughly how they play, any various units. There are a lot, so we won't be covering them in super depth. Follow that by their economy, their technology, and then finally their starting lord and location. So let's get right into it. This is the make your own lord faction, basically. If you ever want to role play a character in the game, this is the guy you can do it with. You can even rename this guy prior to getting so deep into this. Obviously, I did not. I just took a random name because my name is not Ordred. This faction it's kind of tough to describe. You might have come across it already in Souls Race if you've played that. If you haven't, this is kind of what happens to one of the factions from Total Warhammer 3 Souls Race turns into this, and you're a Chaos United faction, and you're one of the few factions that can recruit from all the various different Chaos gods. And that's kind of your whole thing. So first off, you have different glory that you will gain from battles, building, events, commandments, passive settlement gain, and if you capture settlements. This will come into effect later on when we talk a little bit more about it. So first off, let's go over the Lord guy because he's kind of annoying. So he has access to a vast variety of customizations, and you will unlock more as you get different glory with the gods. And then you can change these. You can change this. You can change this, and it'll change the appearance and their combat stats. Followed up by that, this is the important part here. This is your tech tree. You don't have a normal tech tree. Instead, you get tech by fighting. So this is where these glories come into it. As you gain glories, you will unlock, first off, various pieces of the body. If you go the undivided, which is all the chaos gods at once. If you go down Khorne, you will periodically unlock new Khornite items and also Khornite units. So in order to get really strong units from Khorne, you have to focus a lot into Khorne glory. Same thing with all the various different Chaos Gods glory. And as you go further up, you'll also spread corruption and gain bonus fighting against various other factions. And later on, once you get to here, and it's worth trying to get to this point for all your armies, you will gain access to some of the more unique stances from the Chaos God factions. So the Nurgle, Tzeentch, Khorne, and Slaanesh factions, you will see these mechanics in as well, but they will be expanded upon. Overall, you'll get some pretty crazy bonuses if you keep focusing down a single god or two of them. Now, or all four at this point, and then 5. The point of dedication is when you hit here. This is when you get 3,080 glory in one category, which will take you a while. Don't expect to get to this super quickly unless you're entirely just focusing on generating it. You have a choice here. You can dedicate yourself to one of the various chaos gods, and you will gain access to more advanced stuff and better relations with them. Overall, if you really want the super strong units from a faction, you have to dedicate yourself to it. On the other hand, you can stay with undivided. You'll get lesser demonic gifts from down below, but you'll now be undivided. And while you will get a variety of powerful weapons, you'll be lacking some of the most ultimate bonuses of the armor and stuff. It's a very complex system. You're going to have to kind of figure out what bonuses you like the best. My suggestions here are, if you're going to be a melee lord, you go with Khorne. If you're going to want to tank and heal stuff, Nurgle provides some nice bonuses to that. Passive combat, Slaanesh is all about flanking, and Tzeentch is all about magic. And we will come back to this later when we go over the technology in more depth. Just wanted to explain that it exists, and this is how you unlock more stuff. And I mean, that's kind of it. This faction does not have the most crazy mechanics and stuff. You have pretty similar abilities to the Mono God factions, but less of them, but you get more overall. Okay, the next thing we're going to do here is we're actually going to go fight this battle here so I can show you how their last mechanic here fully works and how their economy functions. So when you take a settlement, you have an option to occupy it for one of the various chaos gods. This is your main source of gaining glory early on. I recommend for your first settlement, you probably do Nurgle, just because the starting settlement you're in has a building that also doubles down into Nurgle as well, right here. This will allow you to get up in Nurgle's glory relatively quickly. Of course, you could have done it with someone else. Now, what happens is, now that you've built that building, inside of it, we can only get Nurgle buildings, which of course have slight differences from how the Nurgle faction plays. But we're stuck with that, but our garrisons are generic, as is our economy is largely generic, except for this one, Totem of the Crow, which will decrease the Nurgle stuff. And this one will provide the Plague Bearers of Nurgle. It's a little bit tricky to figure all out. I'd have to show you multiple settlements overall to show it all. Suffice to say, it changes for each of them. And I like Nurgles for the economy. It's just my personal preference. Yeah, I like the Nurgles ones when you combine it with the other stuff. So in terms of your actual economy, you've got a pretty standard income building that you're going to want to build. You're going to have other bonuses towards control and growth. Depending on which faction you occupied with, your starting settlement will have different ones. Since regardless of what you do, you're going to want to get to high level settlements so that you get better buildings. I recommend starting with Nurgle. Not only that, but it has a resource that gives you more Nurgle glory and reduced recruitment costs. Combine it with this building, you're looking at significantly cheaper, 35% cheaper Nurgle units, pretty good growth, which will also combined with that if you have large amounts of growth, you make more money. Overall, I think Nurgle is probably the best for you to start with. And then later on, you're probably going to want to shift into stuff like Khorne for combats, Tzeentch if you want magic. Not really totally sure why Slaanesh would be a great person to get settlements to, but that's probably just due to lack of experimentation and finding out that between Nurgle and Khorne, you usually have a strong tanky front line and you don't need the flanking power of Slaanesh. And really, that's all I can give you for the economy for building. Outside of that, you're going to be doing a lot of raiding, pillaging, fighting, your standard demonic ways of making money. Your lord here does not get an ability really to generate more money from raiding, pillaging, and other stuff outside of some of the Khorne stuff, even though this is not the world's largest bonus. And that's their economy. Let's quick talk about their units, and then we'll move on to the other stuff. Sorry, I'm a bit out of order. So before we look at actual units, let's look at this building here. So we can build this at a level 2 Nurgle settlement, which is not hard to get here. But even once we build it, we can't recruit it. It's locked. We need a certain level of demonic glory. Obviously, I've shown you already how to get it. Settlements, buildings, commandments, events, and just passive gain will get you further and further down this. But to unlock that building here, you need 330 Nurgle glory, even if you have the building. This can mean it's not worth building settlements and buildings for chaos gods that you have not dedicated yourself to some degree, because you won't be able to build a unit even if you can build the building. Now, certain units you can get are better than others, and we'll just quick go over them. So the base units of all the factions are relatively trash. If you want range, Tzeentch is going to be your really only range option early on. And while their blue horrors are half decent, once you get to pig horrors, that's probably the strongest range unit you're going to have for some time, unless you go for exaltic pink horrors. All the other chaos gods aren't really ranged factions, so that's going to be if you want to use range at all, you have to dedicate yourself a fair amount to Zeech. Obviously, you don't have to go super in depth down here to get the Exalted Flamer. But if you wanted to build a ranged Chaos Demon army, you're going to play him almost exactly like you play a Zeech faction. Now, Slaanesh over here, the first one you get here is really good. Hellstriders, it's a solid cav unit. Once you get it, it's going to be able to do a fair amount of your flanking damage and stuff that you'll need for a while. But if you want to get even more dedicated to flanking, getting the Demonettes of Slaanesh are worth snagging. They're much better at flanking, even though they are slower. Overall, they'll fight better for you. And if you're really dedicated to Slaanesh, Exalted Demonettes of Slaanesh should provide all of your flanking needs pretty much for the whole game. If you want a front line that is tanky, for example, if you combine it with Zeech's range, you could have a tanky front line. That would be Nurgle. Nurgle's Plague Bearers of Nurgle are extraordinarily tanky for their stats, coming with high-level physical resistance. And they give you access to a beast unit, Beast of Nurgle, fairly early on, which is also a nice thing to have. If you want any flying units, Rot Flies are going to be your strongest flying unit you have access to in the early game. And the Exotic Plague Bearers of Nurgle do have a slight range attack, but they're mainly your best tanky front line that you're going to get. Now, say you want your melee line to actually kill stuff. For that, you're going to need Khorne. And you're not going to want these two basic units, although Flesh and Warhounds are pretty good. The first unit that you get that's actually going to be able to kill things efficiently in melee, outside of flanking, is going to be Bloodletters of Khorne. I highly recommend your second settlement is dedicated to Khorne, just so that you can get access to the Warhounds and Fleshhounds, and then further on, the Bloodletters. But if you get your way all the way to the Blood Shrine, which is quite impressive, it will just buff all your units and heal, making it a very good unit to snag early on for Khorne. So, range is Zeech, flanking is Slaanesh, tanking is Nurgle, damaging in melee combat is Khorne. So, combining them, the two combos that go well together are Khorne and Slaanesh. One holds the line, the other flanks around and attacks. Nurgle and Zeech go well together because Nurgle's holds the front line, while Zeech's range kills it from a distance. And up top, Undivided Glory is pretty much just getting access to a variety of different armors and stuff. Well, Undivided Glory is relatively easy to gain compared to some of the select stuff. I don't really recommend their pursuing this tree if you want units, because that is going to be further down here, and snagging the units is very important. So to conclude, that same rule of Khorne kills, Nurgle tanks, Slaanesh flanks, and Zeech hits from range applies consistently through all their units. So I'm not going to go into any more depth on them. Suffice to say, some of higher level Khorne unit are kind of overshadow the other Chaos Gods because they can kill things in melee and they do it efficiently. But the others can be combined to make an overall better generic army than just pure Khorne. But if you want to play Khorne, this is kind of a secondary Khornite faction. Okay, so my game just crashed while I was recording, so we're back here, different Lord. Before we continue, I figured I should mention this time I did a Slaanesh occupation just so I could show you some of this stuff. Over here, Slaanesh's economy building is instead control rather than growth. Just be aware that they are different. I still like the Nurgle one a little bit better. I think it's easier to maintain the economy coming in, but everything else is basically the same. Income, recruitment, although I think the growth is a little lower actually on the Slaanesh one, which would make sense. Nurgle is all about growth. And the buildings and stuff change as well. And you still can't recruit these. You can recruit the base devoted marauders, but you can't get the demonettes until you get enough glory. So let's talk a little bit more about this demonic glory. Even though we've kind of already talked about it, it's kind of hard to separate economy, tech, and how the faction plays from each other. So this will talk a little bit more about what I recommend for focusing. So, overall, in my opinion, the corn tree overshadows all the other demonic trees. At least early on, I still like going undivided to get access to some of the higher level units from each faction. The downside with that is obviously you lose some of these crazy bonuses the corn units provide. It's up to you. For your first run as these people, I honestly would probably recommend going down corn. Be aware that you are going to run across one slight problem, which is right here. Nope, it's not right there. It's right here. Corn's offering third. Once you get this, you then have the bloodletting feature. Now, the bloodletting feature is both one of the biggest upsides and downsides of a Corn faction. If you play as Scarbrand, you'll know about this. And honestly, I would recommend if you're going to dedicate to one of these specific gods, go watch the guide on the actual mono god faction rather than this multi-god faction, just so you get an idea of how it functions. Suffice to say, bloodletting requires you to be constantly at war. If you're a high-level player, you're pretty much going to be constantly fighting battles, so this won't be a huge downside. But if bloodletting gets low, it hurts your growth, which can hinder your empire significantly. If you don't want to do that and mess around with that, and you want to play a little bit slower and safer, it's much better to go and stick with Nurgle, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch. The bonuses you get from them, teleport, which is really handy for jumping mountains and stuff and getting odd flanks on the enemies. Seduce is huge. You want to grab this even if you're going down corn. The ability to steal one or more of the enemy's units from their army means your battles are always going to be 21 on 19s. And if you show up with a full corn army and then you reduce the enemies, you're almost guaranteed to win. Or you could do Plague for Nurgle, which will allow you access to a variety of plagues to stick on your army. They can spread sometimes to hit enemies. Overall, it's a weaker version of Kugath's Plague Cauldron. Those are the biggest bonuses you get from your gods until you go further down the tree. You will get reduced cooldown, defense, cost, recovery, flanking, attack. Overall, you get some pretty crazy stuff. Particular highlights for the various gods, and we'll hit some of those if I can find them. Trust me, this is a very confusing tree to make a guide about. Corns here, income from raiding can be very handy to sustain your income. Nurgle's here is all about raising. I recommend trying to get to Nurgle's Gift 4. Even if you aren't going down Nurgle, the additional casualty replenishment rate is really nice. Further down here, the Slaaneshi Delight will just keep your provinces with more control. Honestly, it's almost neglectable. And the Siege one here, more income from sacking, but almost more importantly, if you're fighting Skaven, ambush defense chance up. If you're fighting Skaven, you can get ambushed over and over again, and it becomes a pain. So some of the interesting abilities you can get around you by customizing the armor and stuff of this lord. We'll try and hit on some of them I particularly like. There are some here with this corn one. The Tempered Rage on this spiked collar can be really nice. Gives you additional ward save. Honestly, if you're going to fight in melee, do corn. By and large, the abilities you get, like this one right here, huge amounts of damage. This one is a passive damage to enemies around you. Basically, grabbing a tail ability early on will pay off in the long run. Honestly, the Cornites and the Slaanesh in combat abilities tend to be the best ones. The Slaanesh ones are kind of odd. I don't really like the Slaanesh customizations. Yes, you do get some of the spells and stuff, but the big thing is you move faster, you do more armor penetrating, and you're really good at running down people, but you're not as good as actually holding in combat. On the other hand, Devastating Flanker, if you can get that, the boost in combat stat on your lord can be very powerful. Tzeentch, on the other hand, is almost all about getting access to spells. I find it easier to bring a dedicated spellcaster than trying to customize my lord for my actual spell. But there might be some that you might particularly like. Plus, you get a barrier. It's much easier to build this guy into a pure melee lord, in my opinion. Give him stuff like Bloodthirst, Physical Resistance, Fueled by Rage, Frenzy, and he can wreck most lords in combat and armies. He struggles, of course, with some of the highest level legendaries. The Undivided Glory is not overwhelmingly strong. Kind of gives you access to a whole variety. There are some important ones here that if you can snag. This one right here, Chaos Armor, can be pretty nice. Reflecting melee damage is great. On the other hand, you're giving up access to some of the crazy abilities of Khorne or Nurgle. I particularly like this one. Ward save, spell resistance, and melee attack and defense. What more could you ask for a trophied collar? And then you have to customize it. And keep customizing based off what you want to do with them. You can change freely between them, which is really nice. So if you don't like one combo, you can play the other. It's almost like a Build-A-Bear. Chaos Demon. With the name, with how you build it, the combat stats are decent already, but you can make them pretty insane. Okay, let's go over starting location and the actual Prince of Chaos here. Basically, your access is access to all the demonic units. Once you start fighting in battle with friendly lords, you will unlock random army abilities to use in combat. They're all based off kills, or spells cast and stuff. So it's just a nice little randomized bonus. I tend to prefer a more consistent one. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. Now, in terms of the actual demonic prince himself, good stats overall from his starting stuff. This obviously changes as you change his build out. So don't expect to see all of these. The only thing that really matters here is that his ability gives you access to everything you want. I don't really like it. His trees here is probably the strangest skill tree in the game. Initially, it's all about gaining a variety of glory. Then further on, we'll go down each line here. So the Chaos Undivided one here, Red Chaos, grow your province, better control, better relations with other demons and chaos worshipping factions, route marching, lightning strike, vengeful companions. This is all cheaper upkeep for the various gods units. Just be aware it doesn't apply to all of them. It's an upkeep for just, say, a Nurgle or a Khorne unit. It's really incentivizing you to prioritize one type of unit. Khorne's here is about raiding, sacking, better armor on Khorne units, and a chance for more Khorne rewards. Endless March, cheaper Khorne units, better combat boost for Khorne units. It's pretty much better boost for Khorne units. Khorne doesn't have a lot. Really, the only thing that's unique, because almost all of these are similar as you level them up, boosting just their units, is the initial 8 here, so we'll just cover them. Suffice to say, all the others are pretty similar. Look through them, figure out which god you're going down, and then focus into them. This is the way you do it. Nurgle's here is a reduction in attrition. It's not immensely huge. You can just use the encampment raiding stance to move freely. However, it is worth noting that Nurgle's does give you casualty replenishment for your whole army, not just your Nurgle units, making this a very good starting tree to go down. And that's the main one here. Slaanesha's gives you a recruitment cost discount. Honestly, I just don't like this faction. Some people love it. I don't. You really have to dedicate yourself to one of the Chaos Gods or play a lesser version, but with a variety of units. You can pull off dedicating yourself to 2 for a while, but in the end, you're going to end up dedicating to just 1, usually. If you want to get super strong in that faction, or if you're me, you go generic, but you've dedicated yourself heavy to 1 or 2 of the gods prior to that. That's about it. Get Nurgles early on for the replenishment, get Slaanesha's pretty early on for the recruitment cost, and then figure out which Chaos God you're going to go down and focus on that. Respect to the north can be pretty nice early on because it will prevent wars with your neighbors. Um, it the chaos factions tend to fight each other a half decent amount. This just makes you less likely to be targeted by them. Plus, the campaign movement and lightning strike are always good to grab as well if you can get it. And that's the Lord. Customize him, enjoy him. His start is interesting because, as you've seen, he starts with it out of settlement. So your first move should be to take Forest of Decay. Obviously, you don't have to fight the battle like I did because you lose a unit. If you auto resolve and your units take damage, you can freely siege it down for a while. It's not a huge issue. Just be aware once you take it, you want to start building it up. I do recommend going Nurgle for the first one because you've got this cultist camp here with medicine, which makes Nurgle units even cheaper, especially early on when you don't have the world's greatest economy. After you build it up, you can race over here, grab the Bilious Cliffs, and then finish off Tower of Flies if you want to spend the effort. Be aware that it is a little bit harder than you might suspect to take these initial starting settlements. It just is. Have fun, enjoy it. Afterwards, your routes of expansion are twofold. Over here, you're going to see the demon-possessed guy whose name I'm drawing a complete blank on. Dark Elf faction. Malice Darkblade, I think. He's going to appear here. If you strike early on, like right after you take Bilious Cliffs, you can wipe him out in pretty much one turn, especially if you're lucky and he's deserted Nagar, whatever his capital region is, to move over here. He falls pretty easy. If you don't kill him early on, don't start a war with him till you've secured your whole region. Then build up. You might even need a second army to take him out. Dark Elf early game armies are no real joke, and he is a powerful fighter on his own. And your Demon Prince early on really can't fight him. Just be aware of that. Later on, if you want to expand over this way, you'll fight your way through Zeech faction. Further down here, if Boris Ursus is still alive, there'll be a Kislev faction. It's not a bad idea to expand out here, take it over. You've got Archon the Ever-Chosen, or however you say his name, and Kulik Sun Eater way over here. But once you secure this area, it might be worth turning around and going west. If you go west, there'll be some more Chaos factions, and then further down here, you'll start running across the Dark Elf factions as well. You're welcome to go take those out. I find it to be the easier route. Otherwise, you can march south. If you're lucky, or regardless what you want to do, you can ally yourself with Norska, so you can just march through their lands, or you can fight and kill them. It's really up to you. A good target early on is Kislev. With your variety of units, you can easily customize an army that wipes out Kislevs. Flanking is really good, so Slanesh's, because they have some armor and a lot of their units are range. Slanesh does pretty well fighting them. If you're fighting the Dark Elves, you're going to want some Khorne frontline backed up by Slanesh flanking units, just because the Dark Elves have half decent range. Or you could go Nurgle and Siege and fight them that way. Tank the front line of the relatively weak Dark Elf early units, and then use Sieges to try and kill their range units. Overall, it's a really customized faction. You start up here. There's no super threat early on to you other than Malice Darkblade. After that, you can kind of go where and however you want. Your endgame goal is pretty simple. It's basically get to the highest ascend in service, which is dedicate yourself to a chaos god, or become the undivided champion of all of them and sack and raise 35 settlements. Honestly, you don't even have to leave the north to get that. Just fighting the other various chaos and dark elf factions and Norska, if you just need a few more settlements, you can easily get the needed dedication to a god or chaos undivided from that. Further on, though, getting to a long campaign victory means wiping out basically all the dedicated Warriors of Chaos factions, some of which will die on their own, so this is not as big of an issue. Thankfully, you don't have to destroy the mono god factions for that victory. Most of them are in the north. The only one that you might struggle with getting to a little bit early on is the Ecstatic Legions here, which are on the other side of Norska. And the Heralds of the Tempest start way, way over here. Just be aware that They sometimes die to Grimgor Ironhide. They sometimes don't. If they do, it requires quite a long march to get there from your starting region. The others, Warhost, right there, Legion of the Gore Queen. She sometimes dies to the Dark Elves, and the Decadent Host here is honestly kind of designed to die between other people. If not, you've got to go in there and take him out as well. And that is the Legions of Chaos faction. It is probably, in my opinion, the most boring and the most annoying faction to play. Considering its tech, its economy, and its units are all twined together, I can't give you much more of a guide. Just dedicate yourself to one or two gods for a while, and then choose if you're going to fully dedicate yourself to one of those two, or try and go undivided chaos. And really do the customization of him. He is your demonic prince lord. He is your biggest strength. Also, I should mention one other thing. You can recruit lords of the various factions. Once you do, though, you're going to want to focus into their units, because the upkeep is could be rather painful. And they have the standard skill trees of the other factions. But you want to try, and if you have a Khorne lord, tend to put Khorne units in it. Those are the bonuses to them. It's really up to you. You can kind of mix and match. You can put heroes of the other demonic factions into armies with other Chaos God lords. So you could put like a Nurgle hero in a Khorne army to make them slightly more effective. It's really up to you how you do it. I'm going to let you figure out the combos. I haven't found one that I particularly go, oh, this is the combo, other than going Khorne and just using tons of Bloodthirsters on everything. You can kind of play a miniature Scarbrand up north. And honestly, I like his start better than Scarbrand's if you want to play a Khornite faction. So enjoy. Hopefully this helps you. If you do have a really good strategy or combo, by all means, put it below in the comments. Otherwise, do like, subscribe, ring the bell, all those great things that tell me you enjoyed the video. And hopefully I'll see you in another guide where I can actually talk more about a faction. Thanks for watching, though. Bye for now.